Welcome back, everyone. We now have another session on Nietzsche, and while there's plenty more in this book that we did not read because of concerns of time, we are now wrapping up The Birth of Tragedy. And what we get here is that some of the themes that have been discussed before are repeated, and they're finally all drawn together. They're all connected together. So what are some of these themes that I told you in the first recording that are important for Nietzsche in general, and that I've told you throughout these recordings which are important for this particular book, the stuff we're focusing on? One of these themes is that Nietzsche is a very odd philosopher. He's a philosopher who's sort of almost the anti-philosopher. He thinks that truth is overrated, that truth it's almost dangerous. It can be used as a weapon, and that truth is very much often an illusion that we prop up as sort of like a security blanket, right? So truth is not innocent for Nietzsche, and truth is, there's probably a better way to say this, but overrated. Now, of course, how most philosophers identify themselves is lovers of wisdom, lovers of truth, right? That's what philosophia, the ancient Greek word, means, is love of wisdom. So if you have a friend who's named Sophia, that her name means that she's very wise. So Nietzsche thinks that truth is okay, but often we call things true when they're not, and even when they are true, that there's always sort of a darker motive to why we want things to be true. So that fits into Nietzsche's broader point that what the universe is the universe is with us and against us at the same time. So we're part of the universe, and that's part of why these cosmological forces of Apollo and Dionysus show up in human beings, and they show up in our art. It's because, yeah, we're part of the universe. We do the things that the rest of the universe does. In that way, we are part of the universe, right? So human beings are part of the very fabric of the universe. We're a lot like the rest of the universe. On the other hand, we're the only animal that stands up and thinks and talks, right? We're the only animals who build tools to crack open the surface of the earth and extract, say, minerals from it. So in that way, we're completely unnatural. We don't fit into the universe. That's part of why there's this wisdom of Silenus that says, what will make human beings happy? Nothing natural about them is going to make us happy, because we have one foot in the world and one foot sort of running away from it. So like I said, this is all by way of summary so far, before we return to the reading. But like I said before, Nietzsche's often thought to be very, very negative. Oh, he's so cynical, he's so dark. That's true. But roughly similar to how human beings are in the universe and against it at the same time, Nietzsche's dark and positive at the same time. So when Nietzsche says there's no place for us in the universe, right? The wisdom of Silenus, there's no built-in reason for us to exist. There's no built-in happiness or best life for human beings. We're unnatural in that sense. That's the negative side. The positive side is, okay, but we're also the only animals that can stand up and talk and think. That is, we can talk and think and create a meaning for ourselves. If a place in the universe is not given to us naturally, well, let's make one artificially. That is, let's make one in art. So you see how all these things are connected. So Nietzsche says, fine, we weren't given a meaning in life. Let's make one. In the same way that you probably weren't given a bunch of money by your parents, you're going to go out and make that money for yourself. Okay? So Nietzsche thinks that art is our way of connecting to the universe and at the same time carving out a unique place for ourselves as human beings in the universe. That's true at the, species level. That's what humans in general do. But also, you can take that as a model for your own personal life, Nietzsche says. Okay? So Nietzsche's describing what humans are in relationship to the rest of the world. That's a very normal philosophy question. Then he's also trying to say what art is. And you can take whole classes, by the way, on the philosophy of art. It's often called aesthetics. 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 Tics. Yeah, Aesthetics. Aesthetics. Okay, so that's another philosophy question, a little more rare. Okay, is what is art? Why is art good, etc. And then Nietzsche asks a third question, and for him, these are all sides of the same coin. His third question, the most important one to him, is how do you want to live your life? Okay, so I'll say the three questions again. One, he wants to know what's the relationship between human beings and the world or universe in general. Second kind of question he's asking is what is art and what makes art good? What makes art good? The third question is how do you want to live your life? And for him, those are all related. They're not identical questions, but answering one always shows you something about the other one. So one quick thing I want to say, and this will be the jump off point for today's discussion. That third question, how do you want to live your life? Nietzsche insists that he will never tell you how to live your life. Lots of other philosophers will, and that's one of the things he doesn't like about other philosophers, is they think, tell me if you've heard this one before, or felt this before, that the philosopher is a know-it-all who's trying to tell you how to live, who thinks they have it all figured out and wants to tell you that you have to do what you have to follow their logic. But remember, Nietzsche's suspicious of capital T truth. He's suspicious that we're going to find many truths like number, which we can all agree upon. So Nietzsche will insist until he's blue in the face, he cannot tell you how to live. He does not want to tell you how to live. What he wants to do is show you things that will inspire you to become an artist of your own life. That will inspire you to make your life into something interesting and unique and beautiful. Something powerful, like the kind of music and dance of Dionysus. Something beautiful, like the paintings and sculptures of Apollo. Now, just like an artist, Nietzsche is going to make his own life art. He wrote poetry, it wasn't very good. He wrote very creative philosophy books, which were very good. Okay? He wants you to do something different, though. He does not want you to copy or mimic or imitate his life or anybody else's. He wants you to be an artist of your own life. And just like other artists, if you just repeat what someone else did, it's not very interesting. So that's what I want you to keep in mind as we wrap up Nietzsche. I've said it before, but it bears repeating. Everything we say about Euripides, about Socrates, anyone we name check today, it's not just about that person or their play. It's about lessons that you can draw from that will inspire you to take control of your own life, to walk your own way, to not listen to the crowd of spectators who tell you how they think you should act, not to listen to your parents or your friends, not to follow the boring stuff that you see on reality TV, but to carve out a unique place for yourself that no one has ever found before. That's what Nietzsche wants to inspire you to do. So, when we trash talk Euripides today, which we're going to keep doing, and we trash talk a philosopher that Nietzsche likes to poke fun at, you want to remember what he says about those individuals, but the point is, how can you take bits of that to make your own life into something interesting that people will remember and talk about after your death. But that's enough context. Just want to make sure we see the overall overarching points before we get into the details. So now on to finishing up on Euripides and moving on to the next the next target of Nietzsche's barbed criticisms. Okay, so last time we left it off dramatically. We said, here's what Nietzsche says about Euripides, why he's such a bad playwright. And Nietzsche says, oh, but it gets even worse. And then I think it's interesting. You can tell Nietzsche understands how drama works. At the beginning of 12, he says, well, before we name this other spectator, the one who's even worse than Euripides, let's say a little bit more about Euripides by way of setup. So you see, it's not exactly foreshadowing, but it's like he's hinting at it and making you want it. He's like, oh, we'll get there. But he's planted this seed in the back of your head. So he says a few more things about Euripides. So on page 60, I know this section's confusing, but Nietzsche says that when people deny the reality and power of Dionysus, they suffer for it. That's his point there. When people deny the reality and power of Dionysus, as well as Apollo, they suffer for it. He focuses on Dionysus here, but I want you to make sure you know this. Euripides is a bad poet for Nietzsche because he lacks Apollo in his plays and he lacks Dionysus. Euripides doesn't even have Apollo in his plays. So oftentimes students miss that because Nietzsche is more vocal about how Dionysus is missing, how that dark, chaotic stuff is missing from bad plays, from bad art. But trust me, it's just as important when Apollo's missing, it's just as bad. Okay? So the point there is that there are examples in history that Nietzsche name checks too fast unless you already know that stuff. But the audience he was writing for would have known all these stories. His point is that there are stories where there was this guy who basically insulted Dionysus, and so Dionysus, the god, turned him into a dragon, a lizard. Turned him into a basilisk, like a stony lizard. Euripides himself, so this is more to our point, Euripides himself wrote plays non-stop, Nietzsche says, that talk trash about Dionysus, that cut out music from the plays, so there's no more music in Euripides' plays, and music is the realm of Dionysus. He says, there's no more chaos in Euripides' plays, everything is comprehensible, there's no more Apollo-style beauty, everything is realistic. He says there's nothing left. Now here's what's interesting. Supposedly Euripides killed himself, that's supposedly how his life ended. Jumped off a building. And Nietzsche says, of course he did. Because by denying Dionysus a place in his plays, he denied that Dionysus was a part of the universe. And more importantly, he denied that Dionysus, this dark, chaotic lust for life, this desire for intoxication, desire to lose oneself, desire to be dispersed throughout the whole universe, when you deny that instinct inside all of us, well, like any instinct you deny, it's going to tear you apart to deny it. So Nietzsche says, if you deny the sort of wild side of human life, and Dionysus represents that, that wild side will come out at some point, and you will suffer for trying to control the God inside of you, trying to control the Dionysus inside of you, because he's bigger than you. It's literally like a force like gravity, Nietzsche says. You can only fight it for so long. So that's Nietzsche's point on the first couple pages of today's reading, but now let's connect it to artwork. Nietzsche to me helps us ask the question of why we like to see such horrible things in artwork. Think about the last movie you saw. Did someone die in it? Almost certainly. If someone died, were they a good guy or a bad guy? Right? Was it like the heroine, the main female character? Did she die, or was it like her antagonist, the one who is attacking her the whole play? Well, it's often the good person who dies, right? The last song you listened to, did it involve any references to alcohol, drugs, or sex? Probably, right? Or did it involve any references to, thumbing your nose at authority and doing what you want? A lot of country music does that, right? A lot of rap talks about violence and selling drugs, things like that. So let's put it this way. We watch movies where people get gunned down by the dozens. Okay? But you're not into gunplay, right? You're not like a gangster shooting people up. So why do you want to watch that stuff? Nietzsche helps us realize we want to watch that stuff not because we actually want to kill people, right? It's not that. It's not that simple. It's that we have these wild feelings inside of us. We recognize that these kinds of things happen in the world. We know that the universe builds things up, brings people to existence out of nothing. We also know the universe eventually always brings those people to death. We like that sort of stuff because it's like more true than truth. Right? It's the deep foundation of what the universe is. So Nietzsche says, if you've ever enjoyed watching a building being demolished, or if you've ever thought it was really cool when you saw footage of, jet fighters shooting missiles, or if you've ever watched an action movie where people are just guns everywhere, or even, it's not all action movies and rap and whatnot, if you've ever watched a movie about a love story. The Notebook, I think, is one of these. I never saw that, but I know about it because people talk about it, right? A tragic love affair where two good kids who love each other a lot ruin each other's lives. Why would you want to watch that? Because Dionysus in us makes us want to see things be beautiful, that's Apollo, and then also be ugly and ruined. Because that's the truth of the universe. Beauty fades. Love destroys itself. People attack each other. That's the world we live in. Okay? So, Euripides is bad because there's no Dionysus in his plays and there's no Apollo. We like a bunch of art, and I asked you last time in the discussion what kinds of art you like, partly to get at this question. We like art with death, destruction, immoral sex, violence, nonsensical things. Why do we like them? Because that's part of Apollo and Dionysus. So now I'm going to ask you a question. I can't point to just one single place in the reading for this, but it's been scattered throughout our reading today and last time as well. The question of morality in artwork. So the basic question I have for you is, does artwork need to be moral? Does it need to show us good, positive, moral things? And you can take that as strongly as you want, right? You can take it as like, well, is it better when art has a nice moral message? You could take it in a stronger sense, like, is someone a bad person if they enjoy or create immoral art? So, take that however you want. Strongly or weakly. Should art show us good things? Okay, a related follow-up question is, do you think that art can make us more or less moral? So do you think when we see immorality in artwork, movies, film, TV, literature, etc., do you think that has any effect on how we act or our own values? Okay, and a slightly different but related follow-up question is, does art have any impact on how we live our lives and our behavior? Okay. So the question prior is almost like, does violent art make us violent? Does misogynistic art make you meaner to women, right? This one is more Nietzsche's question. He says, can artwork change your life? Can you be inspired by an artwork to live differently in general? Not quite a question of morality anymore, but just general behavior. As always, I want you to pause the recording there if you haven't already. Think about that as long as you'd like. This is one of the advantages of our class over a traditional physically based classroom, is that when I ask you questions, you can have as much time as you want to think about it. Your thinking is not cut off by the first person who raises their hand and answers for themselves. And it's easier for a lot of you to share it in the discussion board. So take advantage of that if you haven't been already. So, page 61, Nietzsche goes on to say, once more, I'll interpret this in terms of our contemporary art, but he says, Euripides is bad because what he wanted in his plays from his actor is, instead of semblance, which is when something seems to be, or when something appears to be. So semblance, when Nietzsche says semblance, he means something which is deliberately fake. In a good way, but deliberately fake. So think about how you see this on YouTube and all this stuff now. Some of the ways that women will do makeup nowadays. They'll do like purple eyeshadow, something like that, right? Okay, they're not trying to trick you into thinking that their eyes are really purple, right? Or like green hair color and stuff like that, right? They're not doing it because they're trying to get you to think they were born with green hair. Semblance is when you make something look beautiful or interesting, and it's an open point that you say, no, this isn't my real hair color. No, I don't have purple eyelids, and I don't have green hair. So Nietzsche thinks a good actor or a good story wears its heart on its sleeve. It says, hey, this is a lie. This is fictional. But embrace the fictional nature of it, because fiction is more interesting than reality. So 61 says Euripides is bad because when he, the way he writes his plays and the way he makes his actors follow the plays, is that when something's sad, they cry. When something's happy, they put on a big old grin. Basically, the actor acts just like you and me. That is, they don't act anymore. They don't act as a fictional character. They don't preserve that better than reality semblance or deliberately fictional seeming to be. They just get up there and do what you and I would do in the same situation. And Nietzsche says, oh, how boring is that? So Nietzsche's going to have a criticism of you, some of you, when what you like about art is a realistic story. That what you like about art is something you can relate to. And I know that's not going to, a lot of you aren't going to like that, which fair enough. Nietzsche thinks if you're relating to artwork, if that's the primary thing you get out of artwork, then what you're doing is, instead of wanting to change your life and make it more interesting, you want to keep it exactly the same. Why would you want to see someone cry because you've cried in the same way before? Nietzsche says, well, do you want to keep crying that way? No. Or, yes, you do, but Nietzsche says, no, that's not a great thing to want out of art. You should want art which introduces new feelings, new ideas, new desires, new experiences into you. And so here comes one of the bigger slapdowns in the history of philosophy, where Nietzsche attacks basically a sacred cow for other philosophers. Now, after his dramatic pause, he introduces for the first time the real villain. He says, I told you Euripides was bad. I told you there's an even worse villain. Here he is. Let's welcome the true villain. the true enemy to the stage. It's Socrates, who is by most philosophers the most loved philosopher of them all. He's one of the earliest philosophers. He loved philosophy more than anything else in his life. This is Socrates. He died for philosophy. They basically, in ancient Athens, they asked him to stop doing philosophy or else they'd throw him in jail. And he said that he would never stop doing philosophy. So they killed him. It's like the very opposite of free speech back then. So Socrates, to most philosophers, is held up as the greatest. So Nietzsche slaps him down and he says, he's in fact the villain. He had you fooled the whole time. Now, why is that? Because Socrates says, as Nietzsche says on page 62, Socrates thinks that for something to be beautiful, it must be reasonable or rational. For something to be beautiful, it must be rational. It also must be moral. So Socrates, even more than Euripides, wants art to be realistic. He also wants it to impart a moral message. So what Nietzsche points out is if you want your art to be rational, it has to be true, more or less, or at least realistic. So that means get rid of all the dramatic love songs. All the dramatic love songs that say, I loved her or him as soon as I laid eyes on them. Because that happens, but it's not very often. Get rid of all the rap songs where when Jay-Z talks about moving weight, he does not move weight anymore. He pushes Blue Ivy around in a stroller. So that's no longer true or realistic. So you got to get rid of all those great Jay-Z songs. Get rid of, we could just list it off, right? Also, same thing, we can make the same point. You want art to be moral and respectable and dignified? Get rid of all those country songs where Miranda Lambert or whoever it is slashes the tires and seats on her cheating boyfriend's car, because the cheating's immoral. And even though it feels good, it's probably not morally right to destroy someone's car because they've hurt your feelings. Maybe, I don't know. So we have to get rid of those. You know, it's like, what would be left? So, once more, we flip that point under our life, and this is where it gets sort of thrilling, but a little bit scary, too. Okay, Socrates is the worst because he's a philosopher. Funny to hear this in an intro to philosophy class, isn't it? He's the worst because he's a philosopher, because he wants everything to be true and moral at the same time. Nietzsche says, don't be like Socrates. Be like the other playwrights. Be like Aeschylus or Sophocles, or write your own darn plays. Socrates wants you to follow a script in your life. Socrates says if you can't figure out why something's a good idea, so that's reason and morality put together. Socrates, not Nietzsche, but Socrates says if you can't figure out why something's a good idea, you shouldn't do it. And Nietzsche goes, oh, you're kidding me. Nietzsche says the stuff that you can't figure out why you want to do it, that's the best stuff. Right? That's the best stuff. The irrational is the most interesting and the most fun. And there's a whole host of movies that talk about this. American Beauty talks about repressing your desires and trying to live rational lives and how that doesn't work out. Twilight, which was written by a woman who's Mormon, and Mormons are particularly strict about not having sex before marriage, etc., is about falling in love with a vampire and making love to a vampire and having kids with a vampire, right? All this stuff. We have all these movies about war, innocent people getting killed. All these superhero movies are about being unique, about not being like other people. All the X-Men stuff, right? Don't be like other people. Do what you need to do. Carve out a life for yourself. It's all anti-Socrates, anti-rationality, anti-morality. So that's the grand entrance of Socrates onto the stage of Nietzsche's book. And he says, here's Socrates. He's your enemy. Do not be like Socrates. Socrates is boring. He wants everyone to live like he does. And he says the only reason to do something is when you have a good, rational, logical reason to do it. And what Nietzsche would, what I would reply in the vein of Nietzsche is think about love. Being in love is never a good idea. Why not? Because you're going to break up with that person. I mean, the odds are, right? There's one person who, if you marry them and if you stay with them forever, then that person, okay, that relationship won't break up. But all the other ones before it will. Right? And when you're in love, oh man, you're crazy, right? Your friends don't know you anymore. You say weird stuff to the person you're in love with, right? You're clingy, then you drive them away, right? You say you love them, then you hate them, right? Love is a great thing. But why is it great? Not because it's a good idea, and not because it's somehow morally required of us. There's just this chaotic, wild instinct in us for beauty. That's Apollo. You want to love someone who you find attractive or who you find beautiful in some way. And you like the drama, like Blank Space, right? The Taylor Swift song. We all like the drama. We all like the game of relationships. We complain about them, but we love them. So my point here is love is totally irrational, totally chaotic, totally wild, and yet it's still a good thing. So there's got to be something behind why it's good. And Nietzsche is trying to get you to, I guess we could say fall in love with love, or to fall in love with the wild side and the beautiful fiction, and say those should be your guides to life. Not things like Socrates and Euripides. Okay, so that's section 12, and it's the part of section 14 that we read as well. Those are the themes. That's why, out of nowhere, it seems, Socrates gets dropped into the mix, and there's sort of insult after insult piled upon Socrates. But remember, final theme that we'll wrap up this recording with, then we'll have another recording about sections 15 and 16. Okay? But this recording we'll wrap up is that Nietzsche thinks that love and hate, or liking something and disliking something, are equally important. They both reveal something important. So he's not trash-talking Socrates and Euripides because he's mad at them. They never did anything to him. He's not trash-talking them in order to seem like a show-off, like he knows much more than them. He's saying he read Socrates one day and something got under his skin. Something made him grit his teeth. Now, you don't want to spend your life hating stuff, right? That's a really negative way to live your life. But when you do have a gut instant reaction of dislike to something, Nietzsche says you want to look at that for just a little bit. You want to see what it reveals about your own personality. It doesn't mean that you always have to hate it, or that it's that you have to destroy this thing, anything like that. But think about why you dislike it. Because Nietzsche thinks that both love and hate, they scare us a little bit. To be really head over heels, desperately passionate about something, freaks us out. Because the loss of control. Right? We don't want to obsess over a new band too much. When we like someone, we want to play it cool. We don't want to let them know too much too soon. That loss of control scares us. But that's Dionysus. Right? Just getting lost in something and running drunkenly after something because you're so interested in it. That's Dionysus. So don't be scared of that. And hate too. Hate also shows you something because and needs to be focused on. Because Nietzsche thinks we're also scared of our hatred today. We don't want to say something mean about someone else. We don't want to be too negative, and we also, again, don't really want to show our cards. We try to play this middle route of what everyone else finds acceptable, what we've seen other people in the crowd do, and what seems to make sense. And Nietzsche says, well, sometimes when we're really against something, we have that gut, instant, visceral response against it. It doesn't make sense right away, and we try to back away from it, or we try to repress that dislike. And he says, don't repress it. Understand where it comes from and what it says about yourself. Okay, and then instead of embracing the hatred, because you don't want to stay in that negative space, embrace whatever it showed you about yourself. So that's why he goes on and on about Socrates and Euripides, even though he doesn't like them so much. Because he thinks it shows something about his own artistic preferences that then he uses as a prism or sort of like a telescope to see other things about the universe. Because something in him is going to reflect something in the world around him. So he uses his own reactions to things as a way to see how the world might work. That is meant to sort of draw all these themes together, what I've just said, or most of them. Okay, so that's the end of this recording. We'll say a few more final thoughts through sections 15 and 16 in the next recording. Thank you.